Hi there everybody, I'm Philip Ideson and I want to thank you for tuning in to today's episode of The Art of Procurement. And I'm joined today on the podcast by Keith Hausmann. So Keith is someone that I've known for a long time. Keith was actually co-founder of the Procurement, originally technology and more latterly strategic outsourcing company that became Procurement. So I was an early client of what was known at the time as ICG Commerce, where I was leading the outsourced sourcing program for a consumer products company. Fast forward a few years, I joined Keith at ICG Commerce. We became Procurement, and I was there leading a number of client relationships. We were acquired at Procurement by Accenture, where Keith remained, leading the combined procurement services business. Now, in the middle of 2019, Keith left Accenture to join Globality. Globality is using AI to help power the sourcing of complex services and enabling really what's like a guided buying experience. And to me, this is really interesting. It is for a couple of reasons. First, as the role of procurement evolves, technology like this means it's going to be more important than ever to be actually increasing our value proposition, the human element of procurement. And secondly, in a post-coronavirus world, procurement leaders are going to be searching for ways to deliver more benefit, deliver more savings, whatever that may be to their organization, but more than likely, delivering more with less. And so they're increasingly going to be looking towards this part of the procurement and sourcing process and see where they can leverage automation and AI. So I started by asking Keith, as I always do, if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
Well, the truth of the matter is procurement found me. Had this interesting thing that happened early in my career where I worked for a very entrepreneurial, very high energy, more sales and marketing oriented leader. Mm-hmm. And he had this observation that there was like a bit of an unevenness between, this is 30 years ago, between the training and the capabilities and knowledge of people that were selling versus the people that were buying. He said, well, why don't we create a company to go help companies be better at buying or procurement or sourcing, whatever it might be. It was really based on that. So I found my way into it through that route, but it's lasted for a long time now, but it found me in that sense.
So I know you've spent, 20 plus years building a procurement services firm. We both worked together at Procurement, leading into the acquisition into Accenture. And then, you led the combined offering at Accenture. So you spent a lot of time in that world. Why move into technology? Why move and specifically to Globality? Why is now the time when, you thought, what, this seems like it could be a good opportunity?
Well, I think at the end of the day, when I look back at the 30 years of how, in particular, sourcing and contracting had been done or is done, if you will, today, it still is significantly untouched by truly transformational technology. And as of last summer, I was kind of looking backward into the world of consumer lives, and if you go back to 1990 to now or something. Just utterly massive changes in our personal lives, our consumer lives. And I just hadn't seen that, really in the business, in particular the sourcing, the enterprise world. And I was out looking for who is that startup, who is that disruptor, who is that, they come to do something differently. I found Globality, or it found me, but we came, we got to meet each other, and I just said, this is the thing that excites me about how we will change the way, enterprise sourcing is done. So really that's the heart of it. I mean, otherwise, I think I just generally love more startup and smaller company environments that are trying to build and create a new category. And, that's what Globality was doing. And that also enticed me as well.
I feel like, this whole idea of, you kind of touched on it before, procurement hasn't changed that much in the time that I think both of us have been in the profession. At least from a process perspective, we do the same things. Maybe we have different ways of kind of delivery methods of getting the experts that you need to help you do procurement, but the act of procurement hasn't changed that much. Why now? What do you think has changed or is changing that is going to put the old way of procurement kind of under pressure, but on the flip side, provide opportunities to do procurement in a different way?
Well, I think there's a few different things. I mean, one is just you can't escape the fact that, stakeholders and employees and, of procurement in companies today grew up in a digital world, differently than I did. You can't escape that fact. So that the demand and the expectations of somebody who truly grew up a digital citizen and, never knew anything about, manual processes or, running something through a spreadsheet or whatever it is, the expectations are so much different of procurement. And I would couple that with, at the end of the day, procurement, particularly indirect procurement, is always under pressure to reduce its operating costs, but also under pressure to create more value, and also under pressure to retain its own employees and teams doing, ever more interesting type of work. And I think those combination of pressures sort of say technology has to be applied differently to uplift the role that procurement is having, to give the end users a different experience, and to ultimately get more done at a lower cost. So I just think those are pressures that are out there that are really working to drive a change.
Now, what do you think when you look back at procurement? You obviously talk to a lot of senior leaders, both on the procurement side and the non-procurement, general executive side. What's the perception of procurement out there in the world right now? What's kind of the opportunity that we have as a profession to change the way that people think about what we do?
I think it varies a lot, from company to company, environment to environment, and so forth. But I still think in general, procurement is seen as a place that you engage with because your company requires you to, because compliance is important, because adherence to risk policies is necessary, because there's a set of reasons why a good citizen at a company is expected to engage with procurement. It's still not today, in my opinion, something that people are drawn into because the experience and or the guidance they get, is tremendously valuable and adding to what they need to do in their business. So I don't think I think it could be improved in that respect. I mean, at the end of the day, every function, and it really doesn't matter which one, HR will be the same and others, IT, yet another one, that you want your business stakeholders to want to come to you, to want to engage with you, not because they have to, because of a rule or a process or a policy, but because it's a better experience, a better outcome, it's faster, and the value is there. And I think that chasm is still, in many companies yet to be crossed.
Yeah. Do you think is that unique to procurement, or are we at the same position as some of the other functions? When you look at HR or IT or marketing, or has kind of the investment been put there first, and now it's almost like it's procurement's turn?
That may be very well true. Having worked across and been involved with many, many different companies, I think, you hear people griping about, different functions all the time, and feeling like, they don't understand me or my needs, so I don't know is the problem is totally unique to procurement. But in effect, what you said, I think is right, that, companies have invested further and harder in IT and further and harder in, people development and HR. And I think that's right. Maybe it is time, but time in a different way, than in the past. But I don't know. I don't think procurement alone. At times, other functions are also trying to bring in stakeholders and struggling to do that.
Now, how do you see the successful procurement folks who are doing a good job of selling the procurement value proposition internally? Those that are fighting for investment and getting investment from the execs to invest in procurement, versus it being seen, as that almost kind of nuisance area of, we got to do it because a process says we got to do it, so we best have a few people who are doing it.
I think that varies a lot by industry and company. I mean, I do think there are companies that have built very strong procurement organizations that have, talented, iconic leaders at the helm of the function, and they year over year tell a story about where they're taking their function, and they get investment year over year. There are definitely industries and companies that have that going for them. I think that's probably the minority. And others really struggle to ask for a budget. And, in fact, even, in the way we approach our revenue model as a company, a bit of it is because we don't want to have procurement people go ask for more budget, right, because they're probably not going to get it. We want them to be able to fund it in new and different and innovative ways. So, I think it is a very hard thing for procurement organizations to ask for more budget. And I probably see more companies that are having budget taken away, than getting more. over the last several years.
So with that in mind, let's talk about kind of the opportunity that AI and RPA brings for procurement is something that I think we've talked about as a profession for a long time, and not necessarily, at least at scale, seeing the benefits or the opportunities that exist. And I know that's something that you're building at the moment at Globality, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to kind of dig deep into it, because it shows examples of what we can do in procurement if we're kind of thinking differently while embracing the technology that is now obviously out there. So as I start to think about that, I know one of the things we talked about off mic before when we were doing the preparation for today's call were these moments that matter, the areas of kind of the procurement process where we have an opportunity to change the experience that our stakeholders have of working with procurement. I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about, kind of what you meant about that and what those moments that matter are.
Sure. I mean, I think, the founding of Globality precedes me, and, the founders, I think, had some, unbelievable brilliance in the sense that they said, let's design, technology around a new process that, is designed for the end user rather than for, the controllership or for procurement or for the sourcing person, if you will, and really think about the experience that person wants to have, which tends to be more like consumer experiences we have than enterprise experiences we have. But, I think there's a few different places. Like, the first is, I'm a stakeholder in the business and I need to go hire a service provider to do something, right? And I call that the moment of demand creation. We've figured out a way to use AI to interact with an end user, to help them discover what their intent and their needs and their requirements really are, when at times they don't even know it, they can't really document it, and they can't explain it to procurement. So that's the first one, is like, what do I need and how do I buy what I need and not, and not overbuy, not underbuy, and furthermore, not go to a supplier and ask them what I should buy. Right. So that demand creation is a super important one, right? I mean, you're chuckling, right? Because that's, so often what happens, a business stakeholder, they know they have to solve a problem in their world, whether it's marketing or technology or whatever, legal, and their easiest way to solve that problem is to describe it at a 30, 40, 50,000 foot level to a supplier and have them create a requirement or a demand or a scope, if you will, which I don't think is really the best idea, because you inevitably end up going down the path of buying something that's more what the supplier thinks they should sell versus what you want to buy.
They want you to buy that, so they want to guide you to it.
And I've been on that side of the fence, so I kind of very much know how that feels. I mean, but I call it the demand creation moment, and AI can be very powerful in that, sort of basically talking in a very easy, simple way a stakeholder through what is it they need to accomplish, and let's turn this into a spec, in 30 or 40 minutes rather than hours and days and weeks of going back and forth. So that would be the first. The second really is, we do this every day in our regular lives, right? I mean, whether you're buying a new home, a car, a vacation home, or whatever it might be, an Airbnb or VRBO, you discover suppliers or service providers that are capable of meeting your needs very instantaneously and very digitally today in your consumer world. And we set out to say, why is that not possible in the enterprise world? Well, the answer is, of course it is. The information available about service providers in the enterprise world is virtually as transparent as anything else in the consumer world. So of course you can give an end user a moment where instantaneously you can guide them toward the 10 or the 5 or the 8 best suppliers for a given demand. And it's instantaneous. It's not, let's send out an RFI and figure it out. It's not, let's go dig into database X, Y, or Z or talk to our friends. It is an instantaneous process, digitally delivered, with information that is both publicly and privately available, but nevertheless, you are discovering, the best of the best instantaneously for a demand. And I think that's just another area that's just in enterprise is kind of not very good. It's a clunky process. If I could kill the term RFI forever, I would, because it sort of it implies that in today's world that, information about service providers is not available. Yes. Well, of course it is. So that's a second moment, really. The third is just like, again, I'll use, our consumer world a little bit as a metaphor, but, asking a service provider for a proposal for something is not brilliance in any way, right? I mean, it's not technologically complicated, but what is brilliant is the user experience when that happens, right? And the user experience both of procurement and the actual stakeholder that has the need, and that user experience that we've sought to sort of address and fix is, rather than getting responses from 10 suppliers, 5 suppliers, 8 suppliers, in spreadsheets or maybe Word or maybe an e-sourcing tool, you're getting them back. But the platform and the moment we've created it is automated analysis of those offers that you can look at side by side in an instant way and begin to draw conclusions about which offers are better, which suppliers are more suited. So it's the visual, it's the user experience, the UX as we call it, that takes the proposal response and brings them into a very sort of elegant side-by-side comparison for you, without you having to do, have a team of people doing, normalization of data and copying and pasting of data, and basically a lot of work so the business stakeholder can actually look at it and make a decision. That's a big part of what that moment for us. It's not so much soliciting a proposal, it's bringing them back and looking at them and analyzing them and having them side by side. So huge moment. But, again, I kind of go back to, our personal lives. If you're looking for a vacation home for a week in Barbados, you're basically deciding, what do I want that home to look like? Yeah. And next thing you know, you have 5 of those homes looking at you side by side, and you go, you can immediately decide what you want and you want. You don't have to send a letter to somebody in Barbados hoping that they'll tell you about their house. So it is that consumer-like experience that we're seeking, to give, because from a design for the user experience perspective, that's everything. But yeah, that's a third moment. The fourth is, of course, this somewhat almost obvious notion, but if you've gone through that process of developing your demand and shortlisting your suppliers and getting proposals and deciding who you want to do business with, you in fact have all of the raw material to create an SOW. I mean, it's all there, and it's all digital, and it's all in the same place. So we've sort of said, wouldn't it just be brilliant to then take that information, combine it in the right way, so you have a statement of work, you have a document that could be legally used to bind 2 companies for what they just did on the platform. And again, I don't even need to give examples, but we see this all the time in our consumer world, all the time. We're bound by contracts to do different things online, instantaneously. It's lots of fine print and so forth and so on. But the act of, why do I have to go through yet another discombobulated separate process to have somebody write an SOW? We've sort of fixed that. And in my life, having, where I came from and all, I mean, it was a little bit of like a who's on first. Nobody wants to write the SOW. I mean, it's really, is it legal? Is it the business? Is it the procurement person? And we've sort of solved that and said, well, nobody has to write it. The machine writes it. And then of course a human can quality assure it and, make sure it's correct, as the final step in the process. And then the last one, really is, it actually is really important. It's not so much a moment that physically we've addressed in our platform. We've addressed it through the product integration to other systems, which is, you hate for this, and I've seen this at so many companies for so many years, is you go through go through a nice sourcing process, people feel pretty good about it. It was, whatever it was digital, it's not digital, and you arrive at the end and everyone goes, all right, well, how are we going to physically buy from this contract? Sourcing people and the lawyers sort of look at each other and say, are we supposed to know the answer to that question? And of course you should, right? I mean, the end user cares about an end-to-end experience. They now have to go get a PO created. They now have to have a contract set up in the CLM that the company is using. They have to go do those things. They have to make sure their supplier gets paid. So we've integrated our platform into other platforms so that the moments around PO creation, around ultimately, not invoicing per se, but visibility to invoicing, contract record creation, SOW workflow, those are all seamless technological integrations rather than another human process that would potentially frustrate an end user. So we've kind of taken those 5 things and said, how do we make this amazing, for our business stakeholders, ultimately making procurement look amazing, wonderful, hero. And to your earlier question, making procurement sort of the place to come into, as opposed to the place that people are compelled to by a policy or something else. So anyway, I don't know if hopefully I hit on it, but those are the 5 things that we've kind of thought about.
I have some questions to kind of unpack some of that as well. So, as I think about the process, the buying process essentially is a lot more streamlined because you don't have all these touch points, handovers, starting from scratch at a variety of different points in the process, because you have the technology underlying it that's essentially bringing all this together while doing discovery, asking discovery questions in an automated fashion at the same time to understand what people actually want, what the stakeholders actually want. So from a cycle time perspective, what's that doing to the buying cycle time?
Yeah, I mean, looking at it statistically, we generally are seeing cycle times reduced by about 50%. And there's a little bit of a cycle time dimension that we can imagine that is, the technology can go as fast as the human wants to go.
Right.
So if a human wants to go through a sourcing project in 5 or 6 days, they can. If they want to go through a sourcing process in 2 or 3 weeks, they can. And we still have customers that just, if they don't have a burning platform to go quickly, they go slowly in technology as much as they do in their, in an analog world. But if they're compelled to do things quickly, about a 50% reduction in cycle time is what our business stakeholders and our metrics are showing.
Yeah, I think there's a mindset thing as well for us in procurement when you're looking at reducing cycle times like that, because you almost feel like you've been brought up to believe that longer cycle times equal greater due diligence, even though that's not necessarily the truth. You just feel something takes longer, you've had longer to think about it, longer to vet the suppliers, longer to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And you flip that on its head and say, well, we can have the ability to do a really quick cycle time. Does that mean that we're going to rush into decisions that we might regret later? And I don't think that's the case, but I think it's one of those kind of objections that we need to help move procurement away from. That's kind of thinking in that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wish the longer cycle times really were assuring and guaranteed lower risks. And I certainly intuitively think that way you said it totally is a perception. But and again, if you can give digital insight about quality and certainty, whether that be ratings of suppliers that are coming from a broader pool of people, whether that be awards and certifications, if all of that is digitally available to somebody, it just cuts out the time to go, quote unquote, do that due diligence. The diligence is, if you will, pre-done or available. Yeah, it's already there, in which case, it's not so much that you're not doing it, you are doing it. You're just doing it in a different way than you did it before. And I always thought it was just crazy that, that in a way you would have, thousands of buyers asking the same suppliers the same questions about the same diligence topics. It's like, why can't that information be housed and stored once and used by all? And in effect, that's really what we're doing. Yeah,
when you're on the other side of that as a provider, you're answering those same questions time after time after time, maybe asked slightly differently. Right. And so you're having to answer them slightly differently. And the amount of time that goes into that from just putting together, building proposals, a lot of wasted time.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, in my prior roles at different companies, we oftentimes thought long and hard whether we would respond to an RFP, even from a client we sought after and targeted, just because we knew what it would cost to respond to it, and we knew the imprecision in the result we might get, from it. Yeah, absolutely.
And so when we think about that process, the process that you mapped out, is that relevant for everything that we buy, or is it more appropriate for certain products or services, or products or services that have certain characteristics?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for my company, for the company Globality, we thought about this a little bit from the standpoint of where is the blue ocean in the problem, that's out there. And you can see the problem of, spec creation, demand creation of, automating SOWs of, you can see it, and seeing proposals side by side for all the richness and detail. It lends itself to services, complex services that are bought, typically through an SOW legal mechanism. Yeah. It lends itself to that more. We've really, sort of taught the AI and built a platform around, high value, complex services, and where that intent is unique and special, and where, the quality and the feedback about a supplier's performance is that much more important, versus things that are products and goods that have, quality is much more objective, where, the describing of the need is much more structured, and you have a SKU, you have a part number, you have a drawing. So we focused honestly on services, for that reason, because you don't hear people complaining as much about the user experience for buying travel,
right,
or buying office supplies or lab supplies or whatever it might be, because they demand that they just have a different nature to them, and the world has figured out how to make that experience better already, whereas it hadn't in this services space.
So what does that mean for the buyer experience? You think about, as a buyer, you would typically be doing all this work yourself, and I'm sure that on one hand you think, well, that's fantastic because this is all work that I never enjoyed doing anyway, and it will allow me to do other things. But on the other hand, they may think, what does a buyer do at this point? So I'd love for you to just kind of explain what the buyer does throughout a process that's enabled by technology in this way, and what that can mean for them and their impact that they can have, on their organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure it creates a shift. And when you say buyer, I'm assuming you mean the procurement person,
exactly.
Procurement professional,
the sourcing lead, the category lead, whoever it is that's leading that process.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just telling a story, I would almost say, I mean, virtually every procurement organization I've ever worked with, every sourcing person I've ever talked to, or category person, they're always ruing the lack of time they have to build the relationships with their business stakeholders, to understand, the true underlying business needs of that stakeholder, to do innovation with their supply base, to develop category strategies. So most clients I've worked with, when customers, you come in and they have a team that are kind of inundated with the, they wouldn't say transactions, but they're inundated with doing deals, if you will. And they do see that category strategies and, business stakeholder relationships and supplier innovation are things they really do want to do and believe they should be doing, but can't get there. So I think what we allow them to do is create a tremendous amount of leverage in their job, right? So when every single task of the process was met for them to execute, or maybe an analyst they had or something like this, they could do, 4 or 5 projects at one time. Whereas I have clients telling me today they can do 15 or 20 projects, at a time, and still have time to work on the business relationships and supplier innovation, and supplier development and other things like that. So I think we're giving, the sourcing professional, the buyer, a lot of leverage to not spend as much time in process, in process morass, and more time in the things that you will hear them say they want to be doing. And the CPOs say they want their people to be doing. So, I think it's, now a sourcing person is giving guardrails, they're curating, they're watching, they're guiding, they're approving, as opposed to preparing the RFP or haggling about what the scope is, or doing research on who the suppliers could be. Most of that is now, done in using the AI and digitally transformed, so that they can in fact do way more with the same 40-hour, 50-hour, 60-hour work week they have, and still get to the 3 or 4 other domain areas that I often find are just forgotten in most procurement organizations. Yeah,
for sure. When you have a procurement organization that's firing on all cylinders, the problem is not, what am I going to do with my time? It's how the heck am I going to take advantage of all the opportunities I see? So I can definitely understand, where some of those categories, not even that, I guess they are forgotten, or there's opportunities that aren't progressed or aren't looked at in as much detail as you could do, because, you end up just looking at it as a transaction. I got to get this off my desk, so I got to just run through the process, as opposed to really taking a deep dive into how can I make a difference and ensure that we're buying the right thing, that we're pulling all the value levers and perhaps delivering different outcomes, that if you're just there as kind of a post box because you've got a million projects to work on at the same time.
So I think that's it. It's a leverage play that really frees up a lot of time, but also allows the sourcing person to get to more spend, and hopefully to get to it when it's still it's not too late to actually do sourcing. From a time of engagement perspective.
So for organizations that you've seen embrace this different approach and embrace the technology that you're offering them, what are some tips that you could share in terms of how to, one, I think, get started, and two, kind of make the most of the opportunity? Because I think of this as being a change management exercise as much as it is a different way of, it's not necessarily implementing the technology that's the challenge. It's changing the hearts and the minds to think about doing things in a different way.
Yeah, well, I think you actually hit on the most important point, which is hearts and minds, which I would actually start with almost what I just said, is like creating a new vision and a new role description, if you will, of the procurement team, right? Yeah. So it's sort of, it's like you all have, you more than have great jobs here in company XYZ. Here's the new expectation we have of you. And, oh, by the way, you've been wanting to do this, and we've talked about it, again, around category strategies and innovation and so forth. So you kind of recast the role, of the procurement person and the sourcing person, and then unleash them to be the evangelist or the champion with their stakeholders. So what I've seen, some of our clients do is that's, they kind of recast the role, and then the measurement becomes, hey, the stakeholder in the business engaged you. What did you do?
Yeah.
Door A is, did you go off and create an RFP with them? Or door B, did you usher them onto the platform, and help them along through their first experience, and guide them through it and watch as they went through it, and got their feedback as they went through it. It's sort of like getting the very people, who are, the sourcing professionals, to be the champions, to be the evangelists, by recasting their role to be uplifted and making them the champions, and the evangelists of this entire thing. And at the end of the day, I would almost say, we worry about, machines and what they're doing to humans, and I do too, but at the end of the day, things like, supplier development and things like innovating with suppliers and things, those are truly human things that a machine cannot do and never will do. Or I'll say never will do in my lifetime, but, but they are truly human, human things. So it's almost wrapping the story around, we've got a truly human, amazing job for you to do. And we've found a way for you to, get more leverage in your role in your life and go about it that way. I think the other thing is creating buzz with stakeholders. At Procurement, we kind of built our mindset of clients around this book called Raving Fans. And stakeholders who have a good experience once, come back again and again and again. And you have to build some buzz around that. Because my hypothesis, which I think is proving out true in with our clients and in our world, is that the biggest thing that stakeholders have an issue with procurement about is that they feel they don't have autonomy. So you're giving them autonomy, but you're giving them a way to be autonomous that has controls, and guardrails around it. So I find that when stakeholders try it, it's easier, it's faster, and oh my God, they feel autonomous. They can engage a sourcing project, at 5 a.m. before they go to yoga. They don't have to wait till they get into the office, to see if there's a procurement person available to help them. So I think it's the buzz around stakeholders is incredibly important. And then the last thing I would just say is, make it part of something bigger. Everything in procurement does better if it's part of something bigger. And I see a lot of client companies out there right now that talk about improving the stakeholder experience of their professionals. If you look at the Silicon Valley companies, for example, a huge mantra for them is, we want to make our knowledge workers so happy, so productive, so feeling at ease about how they do their job and work that they never want to leave, and they are amazingly productive. And that's what this is about, is making, that end user experience so good that they're better at doing their day job, and they don't kick and scream and want to go do their own thing because it doesn't feel like they have autonomy. Yeah,
you want to compel them to want to take action rather than force them to, kicking and screaming. I think something that stood out to me as you were talking about kind of the role of the human versus the role of the machine is that, it's kind of that changing mindset of what the value that we can bring as procurement professionals. We can help our business, through a more streamlined process like this, and a process that may actually result in better outcomes than what we were able to do before. But then this thought that, the value we bring begins after a sourcing award has been made. It doesn't end at the time that a sourcing award has been made. And I feel a lot of us, the procurement has been structured in a way where our role is to help somebody find a supplier. It's not to help them get the most out of that supplier. And that's really where the value is built.
Yeah, I would argue, and I think advanced and mature companies would generally are already there, is that there's way more value after you choose a supplier and do a contract than there is getting to that. Because otherwise the supplier, if not nurtured, if not, interacted with, if not given feedback, if not, setting joint goals, if not, asked to innovate, they won't. It's just not, it's a two-way street, and the buyer has to, I think, create that environment.
Well, Keith, I want to really thank you, and our time is coming up. I want to thank you for joining me today on the show. It's been great to one, to catch up, and two, to learn a little bit more about something that I think is really transformational for procurement. And I just have one final question. It's usually the easy question I say. That's if listeners are interested, they want to find out more, they want to connect with you directly. What's the best place for them to find you?
So they can always find me on LinkedIn, directly. You can always email me, keith.hausmann@globality.com. There's lots of different ways, but, finding me on LinkedIn, finding our website, www.globality.com is easy. But sure, I would love to talk to people that are intrigued by what we've talked about today. Directly email me, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Well, what I'll do is I'll leave the links to your website, your LinkedIn profile on our show notes page for today's episode. That's going to be artofprocurement.com/podcasts. And just have a look at all the podcasts we've published. They're all there. You'll find this one with Keith there. Go to the show notes. There'll be the links of how to connect with Keith. So one last time, Keith, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi there, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.